The next type of inquiry is a curricular inquiry, and it's when a teacher kind of asks a question and then kind of directs the students to multiple answers to those questions. An example, there's different types of curricular inquiries too. Like an example could be historical inquiry, which is what we're doing today, exploring the causes of why the Titanic sank. Another example of a historical inquiry could be like reasons why Jamestown failed, or another example could be like a geographical inquiry, where you could consider like the development of cities and what physical characteristics of the land like contributed to the development of those cities. So it's just a lot of open for interpretation and a lot of possible answers.
The last one is free-for-all inquiry, and that's where students choose a topic that they desire to research on, and they look up for the facts and the reasons to find answers for that inquiry. I like this type of inquiry because you get to learn about your students, what interests them, and it also teaches the teacher how the students, teaches the students how they can present to other students about their topics. Like, for example, students say, one of them researched about a person, the captain, for example, of the Titanic, and they can make a presentation about that type of inquiry about, oh, I learned about the captain, and this is his history, so on and so forth. And with free-for-all inquiry, you have to establish guidelines to respect, make sure you're not doing anything inappropriate. Some students might choose something based on cultural or personal relations.
Okay, we're doing a curricular inquiry today, and so these are our steps. First, we're going to ask a question, and then next you're supposed to pose hypotheses to the question, but we've already provided yours today for the net. And then we're going to give you some articles where you're going to gather and analyze the data that's related to the question, and then we're going to determine whether to accept or reject the hypotheses that we give you, and then we're going to draw conclusions from the evidence of the research and which ones make the most sense and which ones make the less.
How it's used, basically inquiry is used because the lessons are all driven by the questions of the students. I mean, I know that we kind of for today gave you your situations, but it really taps into the curiosity of your students and doesn't just force them to be learning about whatever you're telling them to, but it really expands on their own natural curiosity. A lot of times it's used for things that have no right answer, so it's just more about the process of how they get to their conclusions and whether they reject or accept the hypotheses.
Okay, effective content for inquiry, you want to make sure that the topics you're choosing have ambiguous answers and multiple viewpoints that can be utilized, so they're not looking at just one. That's kind of the point, is like drawing the curiosity from the topic. You want to have questions that are debatable, so obviously multiple viewpoints can be utilized, and the content has no quick yes or no answer. You want them to be able to like investigate into what they're talking about to determine what's the best based on information, not just yes, I like this, or no, I don't, but more as to why. And for grade level modifications, whether you're providing the research material or having them research it on their own, obviously you're not going to give second graders like access to the internet and have them go off. They're not going to know what to do. So if you give them that information up front to utilize, the topic of investigation, like we did the Titanic, obviously you're not going to give the Titanic to a first grader. They're not going to understand like the multiple viewpoints that we're giving you and how much background information is given. You want to make sure that they have enough adequate background information to make like educated guesses and inferences.
Why it's so great, inquiry, it really gives the kids opportunities to kind of make them feel like they're in control of their learning a little bit and to investigate things that mean something to them. It encourages the use of a variety of senses, so we have some articles today or videos or music, so it allows students to look at a variety of sources, so not only look at multiple perspectives from something they may have not have heard before or something different their own, but it lets them look at different types of information and see how analyzing things other than just print like they may have in previous times used. So it gives them a wide opportunities and lets them just be curious and explore.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of make the switch from our So first, I just kind of want everyone to try to be really polite and respectful when we work in groups today. We're going to collect at the end of the lesson and kind of have like a group discussion about what you guys found, and it should be really fun. So first off, I'm sure you guys have all heard of the Titanic before, right? The tragedy of the Titanic and how it sank in 1912. Well, we're going to talk about different conspiracy theories as to why the Titanic sank. Does anyone know what a conspiracy is? Anyone give anything that they know about conspiracies? Yeah.
Like a different reasoning as why it happened, where there's like someone has like something behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else have anything to add from that?
Going off of that, like someone planned it to make it seem like an accident is something that I kind of.
Yeah, definitely. So the definition that I found, it explains an event as a result of an alleged plot by a person, group, or organization. And it's commonly like something that's secret. Not everyone knows about it. It's not like general information to the public. It's not like, people just don't generally know a lot of different types of conspiracy theories. So that's kind of something that makes it really cool and interesting to us. Another thing is that we're going to be talking about these conspiracy theories as our hypotheses as to why we think the Titanic sank. So that is our big question of the day. Why did the Titanic sink? And these are just kind of, the first thing is just a fact kind of about the Titanic. It was supposed to be unsinkable, but we all know that it hit an iceberg and in fact sunk. So today we're going to investigate more thoroughly, and all of our hypotheses are written out on boards over here. So
We'll break you guys up into groups, and then you'll just be given whatever theory, and then one of us will be with you at each place and just kind of investigate it and get your initial reactions. And then after you investigate it and look at the different sources we have for you, you can think about what was a good source and a bad source, and then decide whether you want to accept or reject that hypothesis. And then at the end, we'll have kind of a class vote to see what people think their opinion is, but there's no right answer.
So the different hypotheses that there are is the Titanic hit the iceberg because there was no radar. The second one is
There's poor visibility that night.
the lookouts weren't properly equipped or alert.
that it wasn't the Titanic that sank, but its twin sister ship, the Olympic.
Another one is competition between ship companies back then caused the captain to speed.
And lastly, overconfidence made the captain reckless.
So now we're going to break up into groups, and since we have 6 possible hypotheses, we're going to count off into numbers of 6. We're going to do that in a second. And you each are going to be given a group of resources. They might be print articles printed out from the internet. They might be videos. So you will be given those tools in your group, and each one of us will be with each group, kind of guiding you along, asking you some specific questions. And the questions that we want you guys to think about are, once that you've gone through all of your data, all of your resources and stuff, kind of decide whether you want to support or reject your hypothesis. Kind of explain yourself, say why that you chose to do that, and then kind of analyze how great or not great your articles were. Did you find them helpful, not helpful, and why? And then we'll kind of come all back together. Yeah.
You guys can come to like a group conclusion, but if someone doesn't agree with the rest of the group on whether they like that hypothesis or not, that is totally fine. We'll talk about it at the end, so you don't have to ignore your opinion if you feel strongly.
Okay. So should we count off? I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Is it 5?
You're 6.
Oh, I'm sorry, 5.
6.
2.
3.
4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, and the numbers should be right on the board, so just kind of go along there, and then we'll keep going.
Woo, you're right.
Cute earrings, I love that.
Oh, thanks.
And a little wishbone?
Yeah.
So cool.
Okay, so we kind of, so I'll like
I'm gonna
talk
grab
about
my
this with
chair.
you guys, and then I kind of have to like video it.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Have you gone already with your group?
No,
because when you check out a camera, make sure that there is a tape in it, because we rented it, but then there's no tape, so that's why I'm using this.
Right now.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
But, who's my, we just have 3? Yay. Okay, so basically, ours was competition between companies made adapting speed. I got this article from the History Channel's website, so that seemed kind of legit. We can talk about it, or I can let you guys know. Basically, there's a lot of this that doesn't really matter. It's basically like the making in the beginning, because there was another ship company that, so they were known for speed, and then the one that Titanic was made by was known more for, like, I think it's like indestructibility. So then, like, the theory is that they wanted to be more, like, be in more competition with the other one, so they went faster than they are supposed to. So you guys can kind of like look at that while I mosey around with this.
Yeah, where's the Titanic?
Don't mind me.
Oh no!
Just listening to your thoughts.
I could tell about the format.
I'm just observing. Keep going.
Wow.
Electromagnetic waves, 1864. Inherent Maxwell's equations are the laws of radio wave reflection, and these principles were first demonstrated in 1886 in experiments by the German physicist Heinrich Hertz.
Say hi to the camera, Annie. Hey.
There was not a ship called Gil. I mean, that's like the author of this source, so I don't think it's very trusting.
What's it called?
It's like the author is Midnight Oil, which I don't think is a very reliable source. And also, I don't ever recall hearing about the Olympic ship. So
It did exist, just so you know. There was a ship called the Olympic.
I've heard of it.
It's not.
I still don't
totally
think
out
it's
of
a
the question,
trusting
but like,
source.
there's
So
so many important people on the Titanic. Like, why? Like, you feel like somebody would have been connected that they wouldn't want to murder off all this. Like,
Cool. Keep going. Me? It's okay. Yeah, it still goes. No worries. What are you guys' thoughts? Good source, bad source, believe it could happen.
We haven't quite gotten to the part of the sinking yet. Were reading about
This
this.
part talks about the sinking part and like what happened, but it doesn't really talk about like, at least I didn't get to that part yet. So maybe it's like the analyzing.
Where's the beginning? And that's why another thing, like, because our sources, a lot of the theories aren't like exactly.
They're not gonna say like,
Yeah,
this is
so
what
like
happened.
for this one, it's like this first part just talked about the intense competition. How
was the Cunard or what was it?
That's the one who set a speed record.
That was the other
Titanic,
company?
Yeah, but Titanic
Okay.
was made by like
Was it
the other
this
one.
Was that the Cunard?
Bruce is
Yeah.
I don't.
And that's why also, like, so is this a valid theory because there's not very much information on
Right.
it, but then again, is that why there's not? So it kind of wrecks your mind around a little bit.
Tricky.
Well, was it speeding? Was it going?
That's what I don't know. Titanic's fatal flaw supporting the hypothesis Titanic was doomed from the start.
It said like sporadic reports of ice, but it was like calm, and then they saw an iceberg and they didn't know it was like jagged underwater, and that's like what they hit, and that ended up going in the compartments, and then it talks about like the life vests not being
talks about like the number of lifeboats.
Because they didn't have enough.
They didn't
but
have
then,
enough.
Is it so? Could that be because they thought they wouldn't sink, or because?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it doesn't.
Are we allowed to use our computers?
Yeah, you can look up anything else you want.
They're saying that the physical
Okay.
shift
This says. I wish this had the speed
So like they send people on the Olympic
of how fast the fastest one went.
How fast the what?
How fast the fastest ship at the time had gone.
Yeah, what do they put the
And
Titanic?
then tell you how fast it's
Yeah, yeah.
they would have tried to like pass like before each other.
Because that's the
Well, we're gonna look for like 4 more minutes or something, yeah. And then so just whatever you think, kind of write some ideas on the board if you want. How's it going over here, Group?
I'm trying to find a YouTuber.
He was overconfident.
It says eventually they discussed the time they'd be reaching the ice and how they would be likely to detect it. White Roller predicted that in view of how clear it was with so many stars, there would be a great deal of reflected light from any icebergs. Smith said if the weather became the slightest bit hazy, they would have to slow down.
But they didn't slow down.
And then probably even if the blue side of the berg was turned towards us, the white outline would give us sufficient warning. There was nothing unusual in his behavior. He went back to his cabin.
We like talked about it over the break.
No, it's fine.
Oh, over the break? Yeah, so I totally agree.
You don't have to. Just because I'm awkwardly standing here with the laptop open.
18 minutes. That's what this article says. By British.
They're accepting. They're accepting.
Used on tip.
At the exact time it hit the iceberg.
Oh, this is cool. Wow.
Yeah, go astronomy class. There's no moon, but there's lots of stars. Sorry. He like got on the boat.
Oh, did he?
In the movie, at least. I don't know if he actually did.
Almost ready to.
I'll just let you know when they're finished.
Okay. Okay.
So you want to retract this hypothesis?
Yeah.
Just make sure that when we talk, like as a group, you're ready to explain why your one source you think is more credible than others and why you came to this conclusion that.
Sorry, Midnight Oil. I don't think you're right.
They have lots of followers.
What if that was
It's hubpages.com.
the most brilliant person that
That's
started
probably
a
like,
company?
you can make
I could change my name.
But
Midnight Oil.
I mean, you can make a username, but I also think that this source is kind of skewed to one viewpoint, and that's the conspiracy. They don't give you like the other side of it, like Kara's source does. So. Yeah. It's hard to trust.
I feel like I'm getting all my best info from this group. Did you guys find something new?
Yeah. That we don't think that this conspiracy theory is. Yeah, we don't think it's
This
true.
is a bad one.
Yeah, because they weren't even going at their maximum speed.
Yeah.
They're going 2 knots below.
How much is a knot?
Or it's like 21 knots is 24.
Wow.
You said the maximum speed was 23 knots?
Yeah, and they reported it as 20.5 or 22.5.
See what see how much 23 knots is compared to
But is it just because they weren't going fast enough? Maybe they were going too fast based on the conditions, if it was bad weather.
It said it was like clear, but they had summer fun.
According to the well, it didn't start in the beginning, but it was only like the first 2 slides, and I was like, ugh. Are you guys still exploring?
You can also write that he went to his room instead of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he like, yeah.
Because he thought everything was done.
Yeah.
Went to his room after a warning.
Just before it happened. He just wasn't there when to watch. He left that responsibility to people below him because he didn't think he was needed to be there.
So they still might have been going too fast.
Lauren, should we say just like take a couple more minutes? So Justine, in a couple minutes we'll come together and share our findings and everything. Good? Sure. It's okay.
Does anyone know being recorded? Being recorded now.
Look at that great board. Wow.
Like they were going like so fast to avoid
You know which one you're going to vote for? I think I'm going to vote for your guys. What? We're taking a class vote at the end. For which one people, after we present and have an idea of all the others.
That article, they really sliced through it really fast.
Really?
Fast, like I don't know.
They found more. So apparently I didn't do a very good job.
Because when I read through it, I was like, oh, these are like some main points right here. And then every time it was like, wow.
Okay. Lauren, are you guys good? Okay. And then, what's a good view of like the class? We can just have them present. I can like shift it around as they talk. Brianna, are you guys all good?
Oh, yeah.
Justine, are you guys good? Yeah, I'll just, whatever group goes, I'll just like hold it to them. Okay. Oopsies. Okay. If we can get your guys' attention back up to the front, we'll start and just have the group share what they found, you can just share your theory, whether you think it's good or not, or like if you accept it, and then some reasons why you trust the source or not. So if anyone wants to go first, or we can just go in order or whatever. Okay.
We said that we accepted this hypothesis because we found out through our sources that there was no radar system really even invented until 1935, and once the Titanic sunk in 1812, obviously wasn't on the ship. One of our sources seemed like it wasn't very credible. It was like from ask.com or something. It wasn't very good, but the other one was very detailed and had a lot of dates and a lot of names and facts of actual scientists, and seemed very like somebody who knew what they were writing about had written it.
Okay. And just keep in mind as you listen to all of these, at the end we'll take like a class vote to see which one you think. So there could be a few that are true, but just like kind of keep in your mind which ones you are valuing more than others. You guys want to go next?
We agreed with it because most of the things we found from our articles said that this is why it's saying. Cause the only one I found that went against it was that on clear nights icebergs can be seen from 1 to 3 miles away, but then all the other information we found made it so that it was difficult for them to see the iceberg. And like the one I was reading, it was a good resource because it was from encyclopedia.org. So
Trustworthy. Okay. Any last ideas?
I was just saying, like, the idea of superrefraction or superior mirage, so it made the horizon look like it was higher than it actually was, so that they couldn't actually see the iceberg. And even, like, they were firing rockets to send out for help or whatever, but no one knew what it was just because of that. Again, the horizon was higher, so it looked low to the ground.
Wow. Cool. Back here?
Okay, so ours was the lookouts weren't properly equipped or alert. We watched a video from the History Channel about the lookouts, and we read an article that was from the ship companies, the Titanic.
White Star Line.
Yeah. And so it was basically talking about like how they didn't have binoculars in the cockpit or the crow's nest. Sorry. In the crow's nest that night because they got like left somewhere. So once they did see the iceberg, so they were like just trying to look with their eyes, but once they did see it, like they contacted the captain like immediately. But the lookout was like he lived, which we thought was kind of weird, but he like basically lived in guilt for the rest of his life and like had a really bad life. And so we thought that like because like the History Channel was it the History Channel? Yeah. We thought like that the sources were credible because they kind of like both said the same thing, even though it was like the ship's company that did the other article. But yeah, we thought it was a possibility.
Thank you very much. In the back?
Okay, our theory is that there was another ship called the Olympic, and it got in a crash the year before. So they kind of just switched the name on the ships so they could sink the Olympus for insurance money. And we did not find this conspiracy to be credible because our sources were like blogs that talked about mummies, vampires, and time travel. So we had one, yeah.
We did have one credible source. It was from thinkquest.org, and at the end it said that that wasn't true. That they didn't switch the ships, and that the Titanic has a certain number on its hull, and they went down and found that number on the sunken ship, so they know it's the Titanic.
Okay.
Our conspiracy theory was that competition between companies made the captain speed, which from our sources, we had an article from the History Channel, and then we also looked up another article from the Titanic Historical Society.org, so both of them were pretty reliable, but they led us to believe that this was not true, because the Titanic company had given up on its speed records in 1899, and they never went max speed. Their max speed was 23 knots, and the fastest they went was 22.5, which, granted, is pretty close, but their cruising speed was only 21 knots. And then another reason why we don't think that they were like speeding necessarily was because not all their boilers were even lit, so they can't go like super fast if they're not even like using like all of their power that they could use.
Alrighty. Final group.
Do you accept or reject?
We reject that.
Okay. Our hypothesis was overconfidence made the captain reckless, and we thought that the articles that we read supported the hypothesis. The source that we had was titaniclore.info, but so I think maybe it's like a medium credible source. It had a lot of direct quotes, which I thought was interesting, and then it had like a freakishly large amount of information, like very detailed. Obviously, it's like 80 pages. So the data that we found to support our hypothesis that the weather was getting increasingly dangerous, but the captain told them not to reduce their speed. So that was kind of sus. And then before, there's like direct quotes that we found about how confident he was, the captain was, that the ship was unsinkable. And he said that even if something did hit the vessel, it still wouldn't sink. So he thought there was literally no way anything was going to happen. They traveled at relatively high speeds, and according to this article, when the captain went back to his cabin to like drink tea or something, and that's when the iceberg hit. So he wasn't actually there supervising anybody or watching himself what was going on.
Now, can you share how you found that information out of all of the pages of research you had?
Well, we looked for like headings that were important to the Titanic and the sinking of the Titanic. Like it talked about his early life. We didn't really look at that very much because we didn't think that was related to what we were trying to research. So we looked at like maybe his career and what he typically does with other ships, and then the heading that said the Titanic.
Okay. So collect. What? Yeah, it's good. We're good. You're all still there. So now we'll just get like an overall consensus, and if you wanna, I mean, could we vote for more than one?
More than one. Just raise your hand.
Two
for the
votes.
ones that you think are the most credible out of this set. So you can take a second to look around.
Think about what everybody said. Which ones?
You guys only get a block friend then, but you don't have to read them.
Should they get up and vote? Okay. Okay. All right. So, do you have a paper you can write down? Okay. So, all votes for number 1, the Titanic hit the iceberg because there was no radar. Any votes for that?
You can vote as many as you think are credible. The second one, there's poor visibility that night.
Why can't we vote?
Number 3, the lookouts weren't properly equipped.
So we're not.
Number 4, the Titanic didn't sink, it was its twin sister, the Olympic.
Oh, no love.
Number 5, there's competition between ship companies, which may be captain speed.
Oh, still no love.
Okay, and number 6,
Oh, we get one?
overconfidence may be captain reckless.
Okay, so for the first one, we have 13. Second one, there was supposed to be that thing, we have 18. The third, the lookouts weren't properly equipped or alert, 19. 0 for number 4. 1 for competition between companies, maybe captain speed, and 9 for overconfidence, maybe captain reckless. So we kind of have like a range of opinions here. But number 2 and number 3 were pretty high up, almost everyone voted for it. So it's kind of a reflection of a conspiracy. Like you don't really know, you can't like pinpoint one specific thing. It's just kind of like a lot of different interpretations and possibilities to explain an idea. So
And that's why like inquiry was a really good tool to use for these, because there is no right answer. We don't really know which one is true. It could be a combination of them, and that's like kind of how our votes turned out. So it just gives students an opportunity to investigate and come up to their own conclusions, looking at sources. And I mean, some of them were obviously not very credible, while other ones were. So just gives a good opportunity to investigate on their own.
So that's the end of the lesson. So for the final survey, we did it online. The link is up on my Twitter account, which is right there. And I can repost it again. I posted at the beginning of class, but it might have moved down a little bit. So if you guys can just fill those out.
yeah, I think we do. I mean, I don't know. Any of you have a lot more to do for the rest of the class?
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm just gonna wrap up
So we'd really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody.